Today is Sunday, January 1st, New Year's Day, 2023. I am Arro Smith. I am here with Richard Hartgrove in his lovely West Austin home, and we are going to have an oral history interview for the Memory Project, LGBTQ History in Austin.
Let's do it.
Richard.
Yes.
I like to start my oral histories by pretending like we're examining your birth certificate. What are the essential details? Who, where, why, when?
Well, the essentials are that I was born in San Angelo, Texas, in June 12th, 1943. My parents and I and my older brother were living at a ranch in Reagan County, about 100 miles away from the clinic hospital. But both my grandparents lived in San Angelo, and my parents had grown up in San Angelo, hence the birth there.
Okay. We're sitting in your beautiful West Austin home that you shared with Gary Cooper for many years. And he died August 11th of last year now, 2022. And he's with us here.
Yes, he will always be in my heart.
Briefly, tell me what his birth certificate would have said.
He was born December 16th, 1945. At the point where he was born, his father had already left the home, and he was living with his mother and his older sister. But then his mother went to Dallas. This was in the town of Alto in East Texas. But his mother decided to move to Dallas to become a beauty operator. And Gary moved in with his grandmother along with his sister. And she actually raised Gary until about age 6 or so. And she was, Gary liked to say that she was a pioneer woman who was born in the 1880s. And she was a staunch believer in Jesus and taught Sunday school and was a big part of the community in Alto.
And tell us, where is Alto?
You're asking the wrong guy. I've never been there.
East Texas.
Yes.
Beyond the pine curtain.
Somewhere in there. Deep East Texas is what he would say. But I think he was actually born in the town of Jacksonville.
Okay.
I say that because I think Sarah Jane Daly was also born in the same town. And they shared that several times.
Where did you meet Gary? What year was it?
1979, it was July 4th weekend. I was living in New York. Gary was living in Honolulu. And we met at a bar in Dallas because I was in Dallas visiting my children, and he was visiting his mom.
What bar?
The Throckmorton Mining Company.
There we go.
And I was staying with a friend from San Angelo in the 3525 Turtle Creek building and visiting my children in North Dallas, and he was staying with a friend of ours named Jim Goodwin in Oak Lawn. And for the next 5 days, I saw very little of my children. He saw none of his mom. And we spent the next 5 days together.
And what was Dallas like what was Dallas like for gay men meeting at the mining company?
Hard to say because I was not living there.
Yeah.
So I can only speak as a tourist.
Okay.
But it seemed to be quite open. I had moved from New York in 83 back to Dallas. I was still living in New York. And the bars were quite open. There were no raids, post Stonewall. I'm not convinced that the same thing could be said true of Dallas, but I don't know that for sure.
Okay.
I know I was a little bit hesitant to go to a bar in Dallas, not knowing what to expect. but we never went back to the bar. We hardly got out of bed.
You had a family with children,
Yes, I do. I have 2 children and 4 grandchildren.
and briefly, do you feel comfortable talking about that relationship?
Sure.
Um, um, as a gay man, as a closeted gay man, marrying a nice girl and having a family seemed like the right thing to do.
Well, it was the only thing to do in those days.
Right.
Sex between men was so criminalized in those days.
Right.
And coming from a West Texas ranch family, that option was definitely not available unless you wanted to be carted off to Big Spring to the mental asylum,
Right.
which I did not want. So I followed the expectations of my parents and married a woman. I had a sort of a semi-nervous breakdown in law school finals that year because I was getting married. But instead of seeing the obvious problems, I denied them and lied to everybody else, including myself, about whether what I was doing was the right thing or not. But we were fairly happy, had 2 children, and moved to St. Louis, and both my children were born in St. Louis, and loved my children, really enjoyed my children. Then I was transferred to New York, and I was there for several months because my brother died, was killed in a plane crash the 4th day there, and my wife called and said, "You got to come home," and I did, but that threw a wrench into buying a house. We were looking at a house in Westchester. And so we were 3 months apart with only occasional visits. And by the time she actually moved there, it was all over with the shouting because I had a lover in the village. And the marriage lasted another year and a half, but it was really never the same. And then in April of '77, and by the way, I did the cowardly thing about not telling her why. So I moved out of the house April of '77 and would get the children and take them to the West Village. And we would do things in New York. And I remember in '78, I took the children back to White Plains where we were living, and my wife said, "Let me put the kids to bed because I want to talk to you. Don't leave yet." She came back and said, "Our next door neighbor saw you last month at a music festival in Western Massachusetts with 3 other men. Are you gay?" And I finally was honest with her and said yes, and she said, "Okay, and then I'm moving back to Dallas." So, of course, she got the house and all the money from the house, and I was giving her, because it was New York, it was alimony, but that was better for me because it's tax deductible, whereas child support is not. So I was making quite a nice salary, but giving 75% of it to my wife and children.
Right.
So fortunately, I moved in with my partner in the West Village, and he didn't charge me rent, nor did he ask me to contribute to the groceries. So I was really living on his charity for a while there. And then every 6 weeks, I would go back to Dallas to see the children.
Now, you've referred to this as a cowardly act by not telling your wife. However, did you even know any out gay men? Did you have a role model?
At that point.
Did she know gay men?
No, she didn't. But I knew Dan, the man I had met on the PATH train, my second week there, and I knew some of his friends, so I was already in a social group most of whom were dead within about 5 years
Of course.
from AIDS. But I knew some people. She didn't.
But you did not have mentors.
No,
There
hell
were
no.
no mentors available.
No,
Yeah.
not possible.
Right.
So I began therapy, and which was imperfect and unsatisfying, but yet gave me at least enough stability to live my life and go to work and do a job. But
And you're
I
probably
was deeply
so-
unhappy.
You're probably so lucky that this happened in New York City
Oh yeah.
and not in Dallas.
Oh yeah.
In Texas, it would have just been a life of shame and
And I would have been a pariah too.
right.
Yeah, it was a big difference.
Yeah.
But then I moved back to Dallas in '83. And Gary and I had met in '79. We would see each other in Washington while I was there on business, or he was there at convention, or in Dallas, or in New York. And so the New Year's Eve of '83, '84, came back to Austin from Dallas, and Gary visited me in Austin. We were supposed to go to see Michael Tracy in San Ignacio, but the weather was wretched, so we decided to stay in Austin. And we went to
And for our viewers, behind me is Michael Tracy is an artist,
yes,
renowned. There's a beautiful panel behind me.
yes, yes. So we decided to stay in Austin that night instead of going to San Ignacio. And we had dinner with Nadine Eckhart and Susanna Sheffield at Basil's on 10th Street. And then we went to a party at Dotsy Schrake's office at the house.
Oh, Tootsie.
A New Year's Eve party. And Gary and I experienced each other in a social mode apart from sex and out of the bedroom, and decided that we actually liked each other and that we were simpatico. So we agreed that night that he would move to Dallas, and he pulled it off. All I had to do was wait, but he had a partner in Honolulu, and they had a bad stretch of the last 5 years, hardly speaking to each other.
Yeah.
But he had a good job. So he left the job, left the partner, left Honolulu, shipped his car to LA, flew to LA, picked it up, and drove to Austin. And then we started life together in June of '84
In Austin or in Dallas?
in Austin.
In Austin.
By then, I had transferred from Dallas to Austin. And I'd been here most of the time anyway, because I was in the group that did rate cases, rate as in bone rates, at the PUC.
Right.
So, which was a 80-hour-a-week job, because we would file a rate case and then all these other parties would intervene against us, and we would work all weekends, and it was, oh man.
Before computers were even invented. It was a different world, different working world.
And they would all file their briefs on Friday, so we had to work the weekend. But yeah, that was very hard times.
Your children grew up in Dallas
Yes.
with their mother.
Yes. She moved from White Plains pretty soon. They were very young then, so they both only remembered Dallas.
How did you include your fairly novel sexuality socially in your children's lives at that time? When did they know?
They knew when my daughter at 14 and her mother were fighting like cats and dogs, So she decided that she would go to school at St. Mary's Hall in San Antonio. So, but drove from Dallas to Austin, spent the night with us. We were living then in a 2-bedroom house on St. Clair in Rosedale. And the next morning, my daughter asked my wife, she was still my wife, we didn't get divorced for years so she could stay on my Blue Cross
Of course.
health policy, why that Gary and I were sharing a bed. And so Carolyn had to tell her, because I wouldn't. So that's how they found out. And then, of course, she told my son. Right. She was 2 years older than my son.
And how did that go? I mean, I'm concentrating on this because in the 80s, you could read about some notable gay men in People magazine, but in Texas at least, it was a social taboo.
Mm-hmm. Well, it went about as well as it could be expected. My daughter became fairly religious soon after because she met her eventual husband, Reynaldo, which colored a little bit her attitude. And my children were both teenagers, not really mature enough.
Right.
Teenagers to get what was going on, and so they never really accepted Gary. So I felt bad about that, and I tried to do all I could to alleviate the problem, but I was never successful. And I think that was the only major irritant that Gary and I ever had over our almost 40 years together.
Mm-hmm.
And I consider that one of my failures. But my first priority was, in addition to being a good husband or partner to Gary, I wanted to be a good parent.
Of course.
Even though I was not around enough. So I would spend what little money I had going back to Dallas. Mm-hmm. And I would do things like Star Wars came out like 77 or 8, something like that. And I flew back to Dallas, took both kids out of school, and took them to a matinee during the school time, which, of course, you can imagine the storm that created at school. And they were the envy of everyone else, and so they still talk about that. I did things like that too, and also my partner in New York had a place in the Hamptons. We called it Slumhampton. It was wrong side of the tracks. And I would take the kids there for even after I left New York. We would go there for vacation for 2 weeks. So we had that, the Hamptons experience. And at the Hamptons, we had a board game there called Milbourne, which is a French board game in French, because my partner was a PhD French guy. So we all got hooked on that. And last week, my daughter found Milbourne in a toy store and texted my son and I, said, "Look what I found. I haven't found this in 20 years." So that's going to go in a house in Breckenridge that we bought in Colorado that we bought this summer. And my children are renovating it, helping to supervise renovation.
Yeah.
So, because everybody likes to ski.
So you have successfully had a life with children and successfully had a long-term relationship as a gay man. Kind of the best of both worlds. Yeah,
except for that one irritant that I mentioned that I still am a little bit guilty about.
I don't think you need to be.
I wish that would make a difference in how I feel, believe me. No, it makes no difference.
Because I'm sure, well, you and I both know men who came out of the closet and never saw their families.
Yes.
Period.
Yes.
Was the status quo.
That would never be an option for me.
Right.
There's no way I could do that.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm shocked when I even hear a story like that. These are my children.
But it was a different time.
Not a different time. There's never a different time.
Yeah.
If they're your own children, I can't imagine walking away like that, from responsibility like that.
Well, straight men also walked away from their
I can't imagine that either.
Right.
I have no respect for those people.
Right.
I just don't. I'm sorry. I don't mean to judge, but
Right.
it's so counter to everything I believe.
So you and Gary lived in Austin briefly and then moved
St. Louis,
to St. Louis.
6 months.
And at this time, you are an attorney working on utilities, and Gary is...
Well, he was briefly a speechwriter for
Okay.
for one of our less successful AGs.
Gary Morrow?
No, Jim Maddox.
Oh, Jim. Oh, Jimmy.
He was in my law school class. So so I knew him. He was, oh my gosh. Wow. Again, no judgment, but
Unctuous.
yeah. So Gary was what we called the trailing spouse. Because I got transferred to St. Louis, stayed there 6 months, went to Little Rock for a year, got kicked out of the state because I was gay, went back to St. Louis to be at headquarters till the rumors died down, and then got another real job there at headquarters.
Briefly talk about that.
Well, it was the most trying thing that ever happened to me in my career. I was with the kids in the Hamptons, and the general counsel called and said, we need you to come to St. Louis Monday. Are you back from vacation? I said, I'll be back Sunday, yeah. I said, but I've got this thing over here. No, you're coming to St. Louis to see me. So they came, I came, had no idea what was going on, and they sat me down and said, effective tomorrow, you are reporting back to the job in St. Louis at headquarters, and we've made up a job for you over here. Because the rumors in Little Rock are that you're gay. You're living a gay lifestyle. And of course, in Little Rock, you couldn't go to a movie or a restaurant. And I remember one time, Gary letting me off at the airport at like 6:50. My chief client was right behind me, his wife letting him off. And I know he saw us. I didn't think anything of it at the time, but I think that may have been the catalyst for that little conversation. So I slunk back to St. Louis, and oh man, I was lucky to keep my job because nothing protecting us. Even now, there are no laws protecting us, employment-wise.
Right.
I mean, yes, we have gay marriage, but you can be fired from your job for absolutely no reason. It's a scandal. Scandal. This still happens in this country.
Yeah.
So, but I love Little Rock. We made friends there. I still have friends there. It's a wonderful town. It was the phone company doing it, not the people in Little Rock.
Right.
So, yeah, that was quite traumatic. Yeah. I'll never forget. Gary came home, and I was sitting at home with the lights off crying. Because he had just gotten a job with the Heifer Project. It's a church-sponsored group, charity, that buys livestock for people in the third world.
Right.
And he had just gotten this job, health insurance. Hey, finally, after looking for almost a year.
Right.
So he could not go anywhere. So here I was in St. Louis, he's in Little Rock. So about 2 months later, Gary calls and said, "Yay, I've been fired." And they're giving me Cobra. It's 18 months. What happened was he had been hired by a guy who was only there temporarily. And the guy wanted to start some big thing where Pepper Project would be on everybody's lips. So Gary had gone to St. Louis to try to talk to Purina and all these other St. Louis companies about putting Pepper Project on everybody's lips. And then the people who were, I guess, on sabbatical came back. These are the people that prayed every day before you started work and decided that they didn't really want Pepper Project on everybody's lips. So they fired all the people that this guy had hired, including Gary, gave them all health insurance through Cobra, and they all started new lives. But it was the best thing that ever happened to us. So he's back in St. Louis with me again. So yeah, we went through quite a time.
How did you end up in Austin again?
Retired here.
Okay.
I got a corporate buyout offer.
You've been here so long, it's hard for me to imagine that you came here already retired.
It's because I retired at age 51.
Oh, okay.
It's right place, right time.
There you go. Okay.
Lucky, and I'm so grateful. Yeah, corporate buyout at 51. Said, "You want to go?" I said, "Hell yes."
Oh.
I mean, I love the people I work with. Sweet people, loved them. But the work, I'd rather be hiking anything else. So
what year did you move here?
I retired end of 94, and I moved here January 5th, 95.
And so you and Gary were in St. Louis
Yeah.
when the darkest time of gay history.
Yes.
And
Well, yeah. I was in New York and Little Rock and St. Louis. Gary helped start the group that eventually became what was ASA here, both St. Louis and Little Rock. Efforts for AIDS in Little Rock. And no, that was St. Louis, and I forgot what we called it. The League to Make a Difference in Little Rock. Of course, I couldn't do that because I was so deep in the closet I couldn't even go to their events. But he was instrumental in that. Met Bill Clinton while he was governor, doing that. So we moved back here in January of 95.
when your Rolodex was decimated, where were you? Were you in New York, St. Louis, or?
Well, it really wasn't decimated. When I hear decimated, I always think of it in the literal sense of 10%. Not like today we call that totally devastated.
Yeah.
But I never have gotten over that literal meaning. I guess the worst thing that happened in Little Rock, and that's where all of our contacts were affected. All of our friends got jerked out of the city overnight, but we kept contact with all those people.
Yeah.
And still friends with some of them today.
The ones that survived.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. All my friends in New York, every one of them except one couple, everyone, probably 40 people I never did.
Right.
Because I was in New York in July of 81 when that New York Times article came out. It was New York and the coast, West Coast. God, I could have been dead. I could have been dead in the mid-'80s. I was extremely promiscuous in New York. And I know I had sex with guys in New York who were infected. I not only didn't die, I never even turned positive. Go figure. And I'm still negative.
Fate, fortune, good
No,
luck?
it's total luck.
Yeah.
I read a book on genetics once that talked about a group of people whose ancestors in Northern Europe, that's where I'm from, survived the plague because they had a mutant CD4 gene that didn't allow the plague to latch on to that CD4 gene, and I must have gotten it. Otherwise, I would have been dead.
Yeah.
Yeah, Gary not tested the minute the test came available in '85. And I was at the gym working out. And Gary ran into the gym breathlessly and said, I got my results. I'm positive. I'm HIV positive. We can't stay together. I said, why? And he said, because I'm positive. I said, well, I don't care. I love you. I'm not going to go anywhere. Sorry. Sorry. God damn.
Those were
hard days.
It's hard to convey this part of our history
Yeah. You had to be there.
to our younger.
Yes, it is hard. And they're so lucky not to have lived during those times because, oh my God, so many wonderful, lovely, loving, talented, fabulous people died. Oh, such a waste. Such a waste.
So 1985, Gary has a positive test.
Yes.
And it's just a fucking miracle he survived.
Yes, it is. It's a
I mean,
miracle.
because
It is a miracle. He did all the things when they came along. All the getting up at 2 o'clock, taking AZT,
right? Schedule.
all that. But in the end, that's not what killed him.
And as someone that took care of dying men at that time, as someone who rallied with ACT UP during that time, it is shocking to me to now be caring for my dear friends who are dying of natural causes.
Yeah.
Who would have ever thought that
Yeah.
we would have the privilege of dying of natural causes? Because in the late 80s and early 90s,
It's a triumph of our chemistry. Just like the COVID vaccine is a triumph.
yeah,
I don't think people take that for granted. They shouldn't. It's a triumph. And science did it.
yeah.
We don't give science nearly the credit it deserves in this country.
So you both moved to Austin. You were retired.
Gary went on disability in '93, and I retired in '94. So that meant we were not tied to St. Louis anymore.
And what did you find when you moved back to Austin?
We found a city quite, I'd say 85% just like it was when we left in '86. It had not changed much at all. Very little change. The change, but then, before we knew it, the change started picking up the pace. And now it's breakneck speed pace. You know, let me be the geezer here and say that I don't recognize all that I moved back to in '95.
No one does.
Yeah. I miss it. I mean, sure, there are lots of positives that come with it. Great restaurants and really interesting, wonderful people from other places. But, oh my God, the traffic. Yikes. Oh.
When you came back in the 90s, you were retired. You were able to be an openly gay man and an openly gay relationship
Yeah.
in the most progressive city in Texas.
Oh man, it was wonderful. Then we got a dog. Gary went to Silver City to help his friend Jack, who was Western New Mexico U drama guy, and they had a production of the Bacchae. Gary went out for that, and during a storm, during that time he was out there, this little puppy ended up in the yard. And that became our first dog.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Ripped my heart out when that dog died. Every dog dies, rips my heart out. Bacchus, oh God, he was wonderful. What a wonderful dog. We had him for like 14 years.
Wow.
Then Gary went to Silver City again,
Ah,
and we got Cosa.
okay.
We were trying to, it was a female dog, and trying to think of a name. And I've always liked the name Rhonda.
Okay.
So I called my friend Rhonda in St. Louis and said, would you mind if we named our dog Rhonda? And she said, how about my dearly departed dog's name, Cosa?
Okay.
K-O-S-S-A. It's some Southwest Colorado Native American, like sun god or something, rain god maybe. So it was Cosa, and her dog was half wolf. So then we had 2 dogs in Silver City. And those dogs were our life, I tell you, man. Wonderful dogs.
New city, new values, new era. You're openly living as gay men. What was your social life like? Were you able to find friends quickly here?
We did. But our social life really began to prosper and deepen and broaden and get a hell of a lot more interesting when we both got into volunteerism.
Right.
Gary with diseases and social causes, and me with the arts. I took the fun part. He took the part that actually needed work. So, but yeah, this volunteering was, oh man, talk about a great way to get involved in a new city. Perfect. And Gary got on the board at ASA. He got on the board at Out Youth. Then Christina Sinsun got us involved in Workers' Defense Project, and then Jolt. Now I got on the board of Zach and the Opera, Conspirari, and all of a sudden we were going out so much we never stayed home. So that lasted a while, and it was fun, but I got a little tired of the constant going out. We were out every night, and on committees and fundraising, and oh my God, that was a whirl. But really enjoyed it. Love the people we got to meet. Love the experiences we got to have. Oh man, Austin can be so much fun if you get the right group. And we didn't find the right group until we started volunteering.
Right. When you were closeted, living in the village with a corporate job, meeting Gary the first time, could you have ever dreamed that you would have had this kind of life in
No.
the 21st century?
No. No, I never. I grew up on a ranch in West Texas where the horizon is, you can imagine yourself doing a very small group of things. And the fact that I'd be living in New York City would just, I mean, the 12-year-old me would be flabbergasted by that. Much less living with a man.
Right.
He would really be flabbergasted at that. But probably not that surprised way down deep. Because that's where the guilt comes in for me, is getting married at all. Putting her through that. Because way down deep, I knew that. But, you know, I've got 2 kids, and wonderful kids I love, and 4 wonderful grandchildren. So it's hard to call it a mistake, but man, God, it sure was unfair to her.
When you were growing up, did you know anyone? Was there a town fairy?
No. Oh, well, there was in San Angelo, yes. But he was clearly deranged. He was a guy that skipped along and carried a purse. And everybody just kind of did this when they saw him. And there was a kid in high school. When I moved from Big Lake to San Angelo the last 2 years, so I wouldn't have to play football. That was my deep, dark secret. Of course, the Big Lake kids hated me for that. But there, you know, like, there were only like 20 people in the class, so you had to play football.
Yeah.
And I'm 135 pounds getting pounded by some guy who weighs 50 pounds more than me. No, thank you. So I go to San Angelo and have no friends, absolutely no friends. And I remember once sitting on a bench, and oh God, I remember his name even, but maybe not should say it here. Let's call him Timmy. This guy sat beside me, Timmy sat beside me and started talking to me, and I was so naive, ignorant of anything like that. I thought we were just being friendly. And there was Bud March on this side trying to get my attention. He's with the cool kids and doesn't understand why I'm not talking to him and not ignoring Timmy over here. But I'm so stupid at that point, so naive, so unaware of life. I was just answering his questions. And Bub finally said to me, you know, he's kind of funny. I said, well, no, he's not very funny. I don't think he's funny, but he meant not funny, haha, but funny, ooh. So he called me later that night to tell me.
To warn you.
Because he was with the little group that I was sort of on the periphery of, but never really penetrated. They let me be their, you know, I could fetch them Cokes or something, but God forbid they should invite me to a party. So, but then Timmy started calling my house also. And then I finally, because Bubba told me, and he was very effeminate. I mean, I could see that, but I didn't know what that meant in those days. But he would sit like this, and I thought, well, I've only seen girls that way. So finally, even I woke up to the fact that Timmy's probably not in the usual mode of San Angelo Central High. So I had a cousin, my cousin and I both lived with my grandmother. So I hated myself for doing this, but I finally said, May, would you answer the phone now? And if it's Timmy, and I said, you'll know him, don't. And so I was cruel. I hated that. But I didn't know how else to handle it.
Did you have any idea that you were also funny at the time, though?
No.
And for our younger viewers joining us, there were no novels. There were no TV shows. There were no depictions of gay men except as
No positive depictions.
Right.
There were plenty of negative depictions.
yeah.
And the queer would always get beaten up, always be killed. Something horrible would always happen to the queer because you had to morally end it in a way that discourages that kind of behavior. So we had that drummed into us.
Yeah. Yeah.
But oh my God, I think back how stupid I was about that, how naive, how ignorant, and how badly I handled it. So
Again, I'm going to defend you because there were no role models.
again, I wish that would help.
We did not have mentors.
If we're only your voice in there instead of my superego voice. Yeah, well.
You and Gary legally married. And,
June 2nd, 2012.
And when did the Supreme Court rule?
2010 maybe?
Summertime.
Like that.
So a year later.
Yeah.
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 And this is in New York, by the way. I think we got married before
Oh, you got married before the Supreme Court?
the
Yes, you
Supreme
did.
Court case because it was still unlawful in Texas when we got married.
Right. That was after I got my.
So maybe 2016 or something.
Right. I got my PhD in 2013. I think it was the next year, 2014, 2015. Okay, so you were married legally in New York State
Yeah.
before the franchise was extended to our home state. Could you have ever imagined,
No.
even when you became aware of Timmy and how you were essentially just like Timmy, could you have ever imagined being able to?
No. And the me then would say, no, I was not just like Timmy because I wasn't effeminate. But that's a cop-out. We both know. I was just like Timmy in that sexually I wanted to do maybe not the same things he did, but in the ballpark.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I would be astounded then to know. But we were all astounded that that case came along. Thank God the Supreme Court wasn't constituted as it is now. We never would have gotten that case.
Right.
Which is why we have to vote the right way. Vote. You got to get out there and vote. It makes a fucking difference.
Yeah. You were legally married at a courthouse? Did you have a ceremony?
No, we did it in a friend's house.
A friend's house? And tell us about the friends who were there.
Well, it was only friends in New York because, well, the exception of the guy who did the ceremony, Boyce Cabanis.
Oh.
He was an attorney at Graves Doherty then.
Yeah.
He was also at that time like chairman of the board of Austin Shakespeare.
Right.
And he had done other marriages. We saw him perform Cliff Redd's son's marriage in Moulton, Texas, and several others. But he did ours, and the vows were based on Cole Porter's "You're the Top."
Very nice.
And the big laugh came when Gary said, "You're the top." But we had several, and Tom Welch, Boyce's husband, was my best man. And Rita Garza was Gary's best person, or woman, or whatever the other thing to say is. Rita was living in New York then. She's moved back to Houston. And we had the only two people that we knew, that I knew when I lived in New York before, were there. Phil Superi and Jim Golden were there. And Don Braswell and Joseph Wu were still alive then. They were there. And several other people that Gary knew from before. But the wedding was performed at the house of Ash Correa and John Downing, who you might remember. JD was a professor at UT, and Ash owned the Empanada Parlor.
That's right. Yeah.
On 4th Street,
Right.
and then it moved to 6th Street.
Uh-huh.
They were great friends of ours. And Gary, in the one on 6th Street, there was a full-length photo of Gary done up as Miss Garish. That was his drag persona that he did because we had friends from our St. Louis days who lived in Fredericktown, Missouri, and all of our Little Rock friends and St. Louis friends would congregate in Fredericktown, and we would have an anti-talent party, and that's where Miss Garish was born. And then the last one, Miss Garish Goes to Peru. I came out on the balcony in my Indian hat and blanket while he was Miss Garish over here, and I announced that soon the performance will start and Miss Garish will come down the stage. In the meantime, there was Peruvian music, music in the background. And it was a long build-up because we changed, and I put on Miss Garish, and he put on the guy I was, and then he came down the stage, and it was ba-dum, 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 ba-dum kind of music that you could walk down the stage like this. And nobody noticed when my birdseed boobs fell out because the other thing that fell out was Gary's junk. And the little skimpy little thing he was wearing.
Which was substantial.
Yes. And one of the women said, "Oh, he's uncut." One of the women was Jenny Gray, who also died. Lived in Fredericktown. She and her husband Dan were the people who sponsored us being there. And she had wonderful boobs, and she didn't mind showing them off. So sometime during the evening, there would be an unveiling. And I had a photo in my house of me dressed in my costume before the Miss Garish thing, the serape, the feather hat, and I was daubing her nipple, something on it so I could put on the, and I had it up, and my daughter and son-in-law came over. I forgot it was up, and Ray said, "What's going on here?"
Everyone loves nice breasts.
Who doesn't? Yes, exactly. Yeah, we had some great times with those people. Oh man, great times. So, what else?
Well, we are almost to the end of our recording. We have
good.
3 minutes left. What do you final words for the generations to come?
Live your lives in gratitude, because all of us are so lucky to be living when we're living. We're luckier than 99% of the people that ever lived on this planet. So live your lives with gratitude, be nice to people, have some compassion, have some love, have some understanding, don't judge, and vote! God damn it! How's that?
Perfect. Thank you for taking the time to sit down with us for the Memory Project, LGBTQ History in Austin. It's been a pleasure. This is a beautiful house. The sun is setting. And
Makes even me look good, right?
it makes everyone look good.
I'm 185, by the way.
Thank you again. I'm going to turn this off.